Hello! Today we'll be discussing the DAST Overview tab in Sentinel. So on this tab, you'll see the general information on your site. You'll see the name of the site, the WhiteHat Asset ID, which is how we uniquely identify that particular asset internally, so you're not going to be able to change that. A custom asset ID, if you need to set one, if you guys have one that you use internally to identify that site. You can set an asset owner. By default, it's whoever onboarded the site into Sentinel, but as long as they're a Sentinel user, you can change it to them. The asset status, which will say active by default. Asset phase, which by default is set to no phase. The client name, so what is your guys' name? The industry that you've picked for this particular site. A site description if you need to add one so you remember which site this is. The service level that you onboarded it as. The service type, standard, gold, etc. And then the website is either external or internal, meaning if it says external, we don't need a satellite or a VM to access it. If it's internal, then we do. It'll look just like this if it's set to external, but if it's internal, it'll say use a satellite, yes, the name of the appliance, and then is the appliance, the satellite, connected or not. Here you can see the users with access, so keep in mind if a user is not an all-site client admin, then in order to actually see any sites in Sentinel, you'll have to, as an admin, assign the actual site. So if you need to see if they actually have access, or who has access rather, you can go ahead and click on that and scroll through here and you can check. The time zone will be set here, the service renewal date here. So if I click edit, you can see what you can and can't edit. So you have the site name, which you can edit at any time, the custom asset ID, the asset owner, as I said before, it could be anyone as long as they're a Sentinel user. You can change the asset status to inactive if you need to, which will stop all work on the site. The asset phase, you can set it to either pre-production, production, or discontinued, or leave it at no phase. If you need to change the industry that you picked, that the site falls into, go ahead and do so there, or again, a description. You can also edit the priority. So what the priority does is that it changes WhiteHat's default ratings for our findings. So what you'll need to keep in mind is if you do set a priority, if it's any priority other than none, it could potentially change our default rating. So for example, if you set it to 10, it could raise a medium up to a high, maybe even a critical. If you put it to 1, low, it can change a medium down to a low. What I would say would be default, if you do set a priority that wouldn't change our ratings, would be a 4 or 5 high. These two shouldn't really change things. But if you need to change the priority that you've set, you can go ahead and do so there. Any changes, you're going to want to hit save. You also have on the right hand side the security index, which is our WhiteHat security index that you can kind of gives you an understanding of how's your site doing overall. We give you a score out of 800 just so you know how your site is doing, time to fix, how many vulnerabilities you have. More information on the security index, you can click on the help icon, type it in, and there should be a document there to help you. Then we also have the global and industry indexes. So the global index is basically how's your site doing compared to other DAST assets that are onboarded into Sentinel versus industry. That's why we actually have you set an industry, is then how is this particular site doing against all other DAST assets onboarded in Sentinel with the same industry. And again, you can get more information on those by clicking on the help section. Before I forget, we have the delete button as well. So only admins will be able to see this. So just be aware that yes, you can delete this, which basically terminates the asset, but you'll need to make sure you've pulled any vulnerability reports. You'll need to make sure that you're done with this asset. But also keep in mind that it will not return a license. So let's say you onboarded a site by mistake and we hadn't gotten started. You'll just need to let our support team know that we need to return it. So don't delete it in that case. Go through us. But if you're done with the site, you don't need it anymore, you understand, you've utilized that license already, you can go ahead and press delete and it will delete it from Sentinel. At the bottom, we have the primary hostname, and that's whatever you've onboarded into Sentinel, and then any associated hostnames that you've already requested to be added. If you need to request an additional one, click add hostname. Just put in the protocol and domain and click add hostname, and then Once it appears down here, it'll say pending approval, and that's when our Threat Research Center team, our TRC team, will review it to make sure it meets the requirements for an associated hostname. And if it's been approved, it'll say approved, and if it's not been approved, it'll say rejected with a reason next to it. I always recommend that always check if we actually have added the associated hostname so that you understand the true scope of the assessment, so you don't just assume we haven't found any vulnerabilities on an associated hostname when we actually had rejected it. So very important you understand the scope, always check. If you have any questions regarding the Overview tab, feel free to reach out to our technical support team.